At 2:14 a.m., the digital world over the English Channel stops existing. On the bridge of a 150,000-ton LNG carrier, the GPS display flickers once resets and then displays a position 3 miles inland in the middle of a French wheat field. Seconds later, the automatic identification system screams a collision alarm. The screen shows 500 Phantom ships appearing out of thin air moving at 460 miles per hour. Then the screens go black. Out of that digital fog, a silhouette emerges that doesn't show up on any civilian radar. The Yaroslav Mudry is moving at 35 miles per hour, its sensors eating the frequency spectrum alive. The Strait of Dover is only 21 miles wide. By killing the lights, the Russian frigate has turned a highway into a minefield. But the Russians aren't the only ones in the dark. Somewhere in the clutter, HMS Iron Duke and the USS Arleigh Burke are hunting a ghost that is actively rewriting reality. The U.S. Navy is providing the electronic backbone for a response that is seconds away from turning the channel into a graveyard. The Yaroslav Mudry, a Neustrashimy-class frigate, lunges forward, cutting across the bow of a 300,000-ton crude oil tanker. The Russian ship misses the tanker's bulbous bow by less than 40 yards. The Russian ship is using the physical bulk of civilian ships to hide its own radar signature from the shore batteries. HMS Iron Duke, a Type 23. Frigate responds with a violent surge of power. Its Spey gas turbines scream to life, pushing the 5,000-ton warship to 34 miles per hour in a matter of seconds. Beside it, the USS Arleigh Burke, a guided missile destroyer, cuts through the chop. The American ship provides the heavy muscle. While the British frigate focuses on physical interception, the USS Arleigh Burke is punching through the Russian jamming with millions of watts of electromagnetic energy. The two NATO warships close the distance until they are less than 60 yards from the Russian hull. This is a knife fight with 5,000-ton blades. On the deck of the Yaroslav Mudry, the AK-630 Gatling gun's sun shackle. The barrels track the bridge of the USS Arleigh Burke. The American destroyer fires the first kinetic warning. The Mark 45 5-inch gun on the bow of the USS Arleigh Burke barks once. A 70-pound high-explosive shell screams across the water, hitting the waves exactly 500 yards in front of the Yaroslav Mudry's bow. Simultaneously, the HMS Iron Duke fires a concentrated beam from a long-range acoustic device. It's a wall of sound, hit at 150 decibels. It hits the Russian bridge, shattering the glass in the bridge windows and incapacitating the unshielded Russian crew. The Yaroslav Mudry swerves violently, its steel hull scraping against the wake guard of the HMS Iron Duke with a scream of tortured metal. This is the moment where the pride of our service comes in. For the men and women who have stood a watch on an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer or a Type 23 frigate, you know that technology is only as good as the person operating it. If you've served on these ships, or if you've got family out there right now holding the line against this kind of shadow boxing, share your story in the comments. We want to hear about the moments where the machines quit and the sailors took over. Our fleet isn't made of steel, it's made of the people who know how to fight when the lights go out. Our alliance is built on these moments in the dark. While the frigates are grinding against each other, the Russian tanker Yelnya deviates from the lane. It's looking for the Atlantic backbone, the fiber optic cables that carry $10 trillion in daily financial transactions. The Yelnya slows to a crawl, sitting directly over the coordinates. A hidden hatch in its belly, the moon pool, slides open. Overhead, a U.S. Navy P-8A Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft is orbiting at 5,000 feet. The P-8A Poseidon drops a high-altitude anti-submarine warfare sonobuoy pattern. 32 acoustic sensors hit the water in a perfect grid around the Yelnya. Within seconds, the P-8A Poseidon's operators identify the acoustic signature of the drone's electric motors. The drone is latching onto the cable. The USS Arleigh Burke detects the shift through the P-8A Poseidon's data link. It unspools its SQQ-89V-15 sonar suite. The Yaroslav Mudry sees the sonar arrays being deployed and reacts with lethal intent. It performs a stern crossing, a high-speed maneuver designed to run its propellers over the NATO sonar cables to shred them. The USS Arleigh Burke has to throw its engines into an emergency reverse. The vibration is so intense that it rattles the fillings in the sailors' teeth. The U.S. destroyer counters the Russian move by firing a salvo of acoustic decoys from its Mark 59 launchers. The decoys hit the water and begin emitting the sound of a nuclear submarine's reactor. The Russian sonar operators are suddenly flooded with false contacts. While the Russians are distracted by the ghosts, the USS Arleigh Burke maneuvers into a blocking position between the Yelnya and the open sea, trapping the tanker against the British coastline. The HMS Iron Duke launches its Wildcat HMA-2 helicopter, while the USS Arleigh Burke puts its MH-60R Seahawk into the air. The two helicopters hover 60 feet above the tanker, their dipping sonars lowered into the moon pool. The Yaroslav Mudry isn't going to let that happen. It activates its MR-3E2 positive fire control radar and achieves a hard lock on the MH-60R Seahawk. In the cockpit, the radar warning receiver shifts from a chirp to a continuous soul-piercing scream. It's the sound of a missile seconds away from leaving its rail. The USS Arleigh Burke counters. Its Aegis combat system transitions to auto special mode. The Mark 41 vertical launch system silos on the deck click open, the mechanical interlocks disengaging. If the Russians fire, the Americans will respond with an SM-2 interceptor that can hit a target moving at 2,500 miles per hour. The Russian frigate begins a suicide burn. It puts its engines to emergency flank and aims its reinforced ice-capable bow directly at the midsection of the USS Arleigh Burke. 400 yards, 200 yards. The Russian crew on deck is manning the AK-630 mounts, ready to shred the American superstructure the moment they hit. At the last possible second, the HMS Iron Duke fires its non-lethal kinetic deterrent, a high-intensity Dazzler laser. A blinding green beam hits the Russian bridge, saturating their optics and blinding the helmsman. Simultaneously, the USS Arleigh Burke fires its bow thrusters, massive underwater jets that shove the front of the ship sideways. The Yaroslav Mudry misses the American hull by less than 15 feet. The energy displaced by the near miss creates a standing wave that washes over the deck of the USS Arleigh Burke, drenching the sailors manning the 25mm chain guns. The Russians realized the suicide burn failed to push the NATO ships back. From the deck of the Yelnya, two Project 03160 Raptor-class high-speed patrol boats are dropped into the water. These are 55-mile-per-hour interceptors armed with 14.5mm heavy machine guns and designed for naval Spetsnaz insertions. They head for the Wildcat HMA-2 helicopter, hoping to force it to break its hover over the drone. The USS Arleigh Burke responds by launching its own 7-meter rigid-hulled inflatable boat, manned by a U.S. Navy Security Force team. The HMS Iron Duke sends its Pacific 24 with Royal Navy boarding technicians. The NATO boats hit the water at 45 miles per hour. The channel, usually a place of slow-moving giants, is suddenly a racetrack for high-speed combat craft. The Russian Raptors open fire. The 14.5mm tracers rip through the night, skipping off the waves like burning stones. One round punches through the inflatable collar of the USR HIB, but the boat's multi-chambered design keeps it afloat. The American sailors return fire with an M24OB machine gun. They are firing disabling bursts into the Russian engines. The 7.62mm rounds chew up the outboard cowlings of the Raptor boats. One Russian Raptor is trying to flip the US RHIB in its wake. The American coxswain responds with a J-turn, slamming the boat into a hard 180-degree spin that puts the M24OB gunner in a perfect position to rake the Russian deck. The MH-60R Seahawk pilot, seeing the Raptors closing in, fires a salvo of flares. The burning magnesium illuminates the entire sector, turning night into day. Under the cover of the blinding light, the Wildcat HMA-2 prepares the final blow. The Wildcat HMA-2 drops a slug, a 500-pound non-explosive acoustic weight, directly into the moon pool of the Yelnya. The slug sinks like a stone, guided by the USS Arleigh Burke's laser designator. It hits the drone 60 feet below the surface. The drone's robotic arms are snapped off and its internal pressure hull is crushed. The induction sleeve, the brain of the tap, is shredded into glass and copper. The Yelnya's hull shudders as the drone wreckage is slammed against its internal bulkheads, and the Russians, realizing the mission is compromised, frantically attempt to winch the wreckage back in. The Yaroslav Mudry covers the retreat. It fires its AK-630 Gatling guns not at the NATO ships but into the water in a 360-degree arc around the tanker. Thousands of rounds of 30mm ammunition chew the surface of the English Channel into a froth of white foam and lead. The USS Arleigh Burke doesn't back off. It moves into the kill zone, bringing its phalanx CIWS to bear in surface mode. The American shells are airburst rounds. They explode 10 feet above the Russian deck, peppering the Yaroslav Mudry's sensor arrays with shrapnel and shattering its radar dishes. The Russian frigate responds by launching a massive cloud of chaff and flares. The civilian tankers in the area, their radars already jammed, now see a wall of fire in the sky. Captains are screaming in 5 different languages, begging to know if World War III has started. The Yaroslav Mudry and the Yelnya use the smoke and fire as a screen to break toward the Atlantic. They push their engines to 110% of their rated capacity, the funnels belching thick black smoke as they flee. The NATO task force pursues them to the very edge of the territorial waters, their bows dipping deep into the swells, their crews still manning the guns. The chase continues for 20 miles. The two forces are now in the open Atlantic, the waves growing to 10 feet. The Yaroslav Mudry turns one last time, its bridge battered, its hull scarred from the contact. It locks its Harpoon-equivalent missiles onto the USS Arleigh Burke. The American destroyer responds by locking its SM-6 missiles onto the Russian frigate. The SM-6 is the most versatile missile in the U.S. arsenal. It can hit an aircraft, a ballistic missile, or a ship with equal lethality. At this range, less than 10 miles, the SM-6 would hit the Russian frigate in less than 15 seconds. For 10 minutes, the two ships sit in a dead man's lock. If a single sensor glitch occurs, if a single bird flies through the radar beam and triggers an automated response, both ships will be at the bottom of the ocean. The Russians are the first to blink. The Yaroslav Mudry turns its bow toward the south, heading for the Mediterranean. The Yelnya, its moon pool doors bent, and leaking oil follows slowly behind. They leave behind a trail of debris and a shattered drone on the seabed. The USS Arleigh, Burke, and HMS Iron Duke remain on the line. The side of the American hull is missing paint where the Russian wake threw debris against it, but they are still here. The cables are still intact. As the sun begins to rise, the GPS signals on the merchant ships snap back to reality. The world continues to turn, unaware that for 4 hours the English Channel was a combat zone. But every sailor on those ships knows the truth. The Russians weren't trying to start a war. They were trying to see if the US and the UK had the stomach to fight one, and that night they got their answer in 20mm shells and 150 decibel screams. Before you go, one thing about the Sea Scepter and the SM-2 that almost nobody talks about. While they are both primary interceptors for the UK and the US, they handle the launch phase completely differently. The SM-2 on the USS Arleigh Burke uses a hot launch. When that rocket ignites in the Mark 41 vertical launch system, it's an explosion contained in a steel box with the flame vented out through the deck. But the Sea Scepter on the HMS Iron Duke uses a cold launch system. A high-pressure piston pops the missile 100 feet into the air before the engine ever starts. Why does that matter in a place like the English Channel? Because a hot launch creates a massive infrared signature that blinds the ship's own sensors for several critical seconds. In those seconds in a crowded lane, you could lose track of a second incoming threat. By using a cold launch, the British can fire and maintain a perfect radar picture of the target the entire time. The US and the UK brought two different philosophies of defense, ensuring that whether the enemy came from the sky or the surface, there was no blind spot. Think about that. The next time you see a routine patrol, remember every piece of gear on that deck was designed for a fight that hasn't happened yet. Disclaimer, we respect the truth, and this video is our way of dramatizing a real event to give the audience a detailed look. However, some elements in this video also present a hypothetical scenario and are not a factual report of real events. All events, dialogues, and character emotions depicted are fictional, based on publicly available information about real-world military capabilities and geopolitical tensions. Thank you.